Ask Reddit says there's a massive trend on LinkedIn talking about B2C style brand marketing and B2B these days. In my experience, there's no distinction between brand and demand gen marketing until you reach a significant ARR. I'm curious to hear what others think. What's your take on that, Tom?
Well, I mean, I kind of come a bit more from like the B2C background and more of a brand like creative guy. So I think, of course, brand marketing is the most important part. Really, it's a way for companies to establish themselves in the market and like have a really strong perspective about what is needed for their clients in a marketplace.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think where it kind of where it might split off and be a little bit different is, traditional brand marketing is around creating attention and grabbing that attention, creating awareness. Whereas, really demand generation in the B2B space is not just like raising your hand saying, "Here's who I am, recognize me," but really like addressing and highlighting some of the pains that they may be experiencing and driving that brand affinity as being able to offer up solutions. So kind of taking a little bit of a difference between traditional brand marketing and demand generation in a B2B setting where you're really leveraging that demand gen to create brand, especially early on where you may not have a lot of budget to center around brand, but really in a way that helps guide people through a buying process to help alleviate some of those pains they're experiencing.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that I get concerned about with B2B brands talking about brand marketing is the trap that most of them fall into is they view brand as a way for them to tell the world about themselves. Where I think that's one thing that's pretty unique about demand gen and something that can be brought into brand is really coming at it from a client's perspective of like what they need to see out of a brand and then formulating the brand to kind of match what the client needs, both from a solution to their problem, but also from a messaging and conversation point of view.
Yeah, I think when a lot of people talk about brand, I think it scares a lot of people off, right? And the main reason for that is it's really difficult to track the impact of brand. How do you track the ROI of brand, right? And I think that's where some people lean a little more towards maybe some more direct response marketing, where you threw a Google ad up there, you get a click, you get a sale, and it's very easy to track. I think where demand generation really fits in is trying to mesh the two so they're not at odds with each other in a way that incorporates some of the brand development, but also in a way that has some ROI, even if it's not directly tracked through direct attribution.
How do you think about like how a company can use demand gen tactics to build their brand? Like what are some of the key components that you see in good demand gen that translate easily over to brand?
Yeah, that's a great question. So much of brand is about like establishing yourself as a key leader and being recognizable. In demand generation, our approach is whenever we create content, it's always centered around a unique point of view. And so by establishing that unique point of view, you establish yourself as a true leader, thought leader in the space that really creates kind of a differentiator for you. So in that way, having that unique point of view makes you recognizable and helps you cut through the noise, which in turn helps to build your brand. You recognize the ability to recognize you and the ability to take action from that unique point of view.
Yeah, I think that key idea of a unique point of view is really something that I mean, not just brand, but any other part of marketing machine can take as a key component of their messaging and figure out how to transform that for the specific channel or level of the funnel that people are marketing within.
Yeah, absolutely agree with you there.
You have any further thoughts about like B2C style brand marketing in the B2B space?
Yeah, I think there's a tremendous influence of B2C on the B2B space. I think B2C is generally 5-10 years ahead of B2B and how it approaches marketing, and I think that B2C, I think you're going to see a lot of those trends come to fruition in the B2B space. Things like it took B2B brands forever to realize, hey, you're not marketing to a company, you're marketing to a person, and so you've got to appeal to the individual. I think you're seeing kind of this evolution of influencers and how B2B brands are starting to look at how to leverage influencers in the B2B space. Even right down to social media. B2B brands were very slow compared to B2C brands, and adopting social media as a means of truly marketing and trying to figure out where their audience lives and how to actually leverage social media in their marketing efforts.
It's really interesting. Like, B2B brands are a lot more sophisticated in the overall customer journey, I think. But B2C brands have quite a bit to teach about being really efficient in shortening the sales cycle, because most B2C brands probably aren't really dealing with sales reps or any sort of outreach. It's just basically whatever the paid ad or the paid channels or the organic channels driving to the purchase much faster. So it's interesting to see how that kind of translates into a B2B world where there are still other components of the customer journey in play.
Yeah, I'm curious from you, Tom. You know, you're a real B2C expert. I'm curious to hear from you. Like, what is B2B missing out on that you think the B2C space is gonna bring to the table?
But you kind of hit on it, like with influencers or kind of really personifying the brand and becoming a conversational partner in this relationship between brands and potential clients. Like, with B2B, there's very little, in my experience, brand talking to individual clients. It's a lot more sales rep of the brand talking. Where in B2C, you have a lot more conversations going on organically in social, or just more generally directly from the brand to the client, driving them towards that ultimate goal.
Yeah, I see that as well. I see the personalization really becoming a key part of B2B strategy.
Nice. All right. Brandon, are you focusing on SEO as part of your essay? All right, sorry, Mr. Try that again. All right, up next from Ask Reddit, are you focusing on SEO as part of your SaaS marketing strategy?
Man, I love the question. I know we've gone round and round about how much do we leverage SEO in our strategies, specifically in B2B. My opinion there is, you know, I kind of break up SEO into two pieces, like creating the foundational pieces and the architecture within your website to support SEO. You got to be crawlable, you got to have your pages indexed, so on and so forth. But when it comes to creating content, I really don't take an SEO first approach to how I create content. Because that's what everybody else is doing, and it just becomes a sea of, you know, let me how many keywords can I stuff into this article, or your mindset first is how do I get traffic to my site, not what's valuable to the consumer. So when I write content, I take the approach of like, hey, somebody's out there and they're struggling with a problem. What are the keywords that they're searching to try to find a solution to their problem? And then I back up and I like to look at psychologically, like what's leading them to do that? What are the pains they're experiencing? What are the outcomes they're trying to drive that they're not able to drive right now? And that's where I center my content around. So it actually takes a step and captures a lot of traffic even before they even know what to search. And in that way, like I've seen in a couple of the companies that I've worked with, that type of content ends up outranking some of the keyword rich content that's out there around a similar topic, just because it's more helpful and it really aligns with how the consumer's thinking and what they're trying to get out of their search.
Yeah, I think, like so many things, like especially in digital marketing, people get like sucked into these very specific, I don't want to call them hacks, but things that work very narrowly, and forget about all the work that goes into creating successful marketing, which is understanding the customer and creating content that services their needs and addresses the problems they have, like you're talking about. So I mean, yeah, I totally agree. I don't SEO specific channels, I don't think any of it matters as much as people want to believe, especially now with the consistent changing of how the engines work. I think it ends up coming down to putting out really high quality content that answers specific problems for potential clients.
Yeah, you know, the other thing that, you know, the other reason that I kind of take that approach is, you know, if you're creating a us first type of piece of content, what you're really doing is you're not paying attention to the value to the consumer. So they may land on your page and they may see what your keyword rich article, but if they don't find the content valuable, they're not building that affinity to you, and they're not enticed to take the next step. It's not usable for them. They bounce. They go back to Google or ChatGPT or whatever, and they go to find the solution that they're actually searching for. And so in that way, it may drive traffic in the short term, but at the detriment of actually creating qualified opportunities for your sales team.
All right. So in the light of saying that SEO isn't the goal, good content is the goal, and we've just dispelled what we think is distracting with SEO. How can like B2B marketers out there think through the process of creating this really good content?
Yeah, great question. What I encourage people to do in the process we follow here at Edge Marketing is really diving deep and doing customer interviews to hear from your current customer base about what they were doing before your solution, what were the aha moments that led them to eventually work with your solution. That gives you a lot of great qualitative feedback on how they're thinking and feeling through the buyer's journey. We'll also triangulate that with doing some keyword research to find out what people are searching for, but then being able to, strategize around what is leading people to do that. But then also another great source is, listening to sales calls. Our team listens to at least two or three sales calls on what we use as Gong for those recordings. Listening to those Gong recordings and not using the generative AI to pull out keywords and stuff like that, but truly listening to the customer to see how they're talking about the problem, the type of language that they're using to talk about the problems they face, is really where a lot of our content strategy is rooted. From there, being able to take the questions and the pains that they're experiencing through those three modes of research, and being able to say, like, what's our opinion on that? Like, what is the advice we would give to somebody in that situation? How does our product support that? And pairing that up with any of the research that kind of goes into helping them solve that problem.
Yeah, I think it's really. I mean, it's, with all the AI and everything out there, nobody wants to hear that you got to talk to your customers or listen to sales calls. But I think ultimately that is what's always like been a foundational part of marketing is understanding what your customer needs in their own language and creating content with your own perspective on it. Um, and then it's just a matter of finding the appropriate channel for that content.
Yeah, it all starts with being really tight on your ICP. A lot of people think by casting a wide net, we'll just like draw these people in, we'll get a lot of at bats. For one, it just doesn't work that way. It's very inefficient to cast that wide net. You're spending a lot of money to get all of that traffic. And then for the other, it's hit or miss on, are you attracting the right people? Your sales team are talking to the wrong people if they get that far. And so it's important to really like start with that ICP, and then as you develop that content. When I say content, I don't mean like write a blog. I mean do the research, create the narrative around a topic, and then like you said, it's finding the right distribution methods for your ICP, where they go to consume that stuff. And then what's the right channel for this particular message. Some things are better in as a long form article. Some are better as a video or whatever. So, yeah, to your point, just really, really understanding your ideal customer and where they like to consume content.
Yeah, I know we've kind of gone way off topic from SEO, but I think it is, if we think of SEO as like search engine optimization, I mean, that search engine can be YouTube. So if your content answers the client or the prospect's problem on YouTube, it's likely optimized for that. So I'm going to call this one answered.
Yeah, nice, awesome. Okay, Tom. Next up on Ask Reddit is gated content generating leads these days.
I hate gated content so much as a consumer.
Same, same. I'm with you.
Like I understand, like again, this kind of gets back to specific tactics that marketers have developed but I don't think it's relevant anymore. Like everything should be ungated, especially as customer has become a lot more sophisticated online. I know it's weird to say like this deep into the internet era of becoming more sophisticated online, but there's all the information's out there. There's nothing really probably unique about what most brands think should be behind their gated content. Really, and this is my strong perspective, they're really just trying to trick people into giving their email address that they're going to spam them and follow up with a bunch of sales emails or calls for content that's probably not worth the value of that.
Yeah, I agree. I think a lot of times we think our content is much more valuable than it probably is, right? Like so valuable that you've got to give us your name, phone number, and email address. And oh, by the way, just because you gave us that and you downloaded some ebook or some like benchmark analysis, that means that you're in a buying process, and our salespeople are going to pound you with a 10 email sequence and call you every other day, maybe even twice a day. And it's just not the case. With like you said, like information is so accessible online. Tools like Apollo.io, like you without if you don't gate that content, you're going to get a lot more impressions, views, consumption, and you can use that information to create intent signals on some of these platforms. All the information's out there. Like if you don't know who your buyers are, you don't know their contact information. You're just not looking hard enough. And so to create a piece of content and put a gate in front of it, require that information, it's just lazy, and it just suppresses the consumption of the content that hopefully you're creating in a valuable way.
Yeah, I mean, the only caveat I'll give to that is if your information is that valuable, you should probably charge for it. Like,
Agree,
like
agree.
I mean, there are reports that companies put a lot of time and effort into that they want to make sure that they recoup some of the value, and that could still be qualifying potential sales opportunities. But if it is that valuable, you should be charging for it.
Yeah, agreed, agreed. You no longer have just a piece of free content. You now have a product.
Yeah, and I think that puts lot more pressure on the marketing team too to make sure that it delivers on the value, because they probably don't feel as much pressure to deliver on the value for an email address. But if somebody's paying for that, I would feel the pressure.
For sure, for sure.
All right. Up next on our Ask Reddit, influencers for SaaS. Has anyone tried this?
Yeah, a couple of clients that I've worked with, I think I mentioned in an earlier segment. We have experimented with B2B influencers. Where my tips there, where I've seen this go wrong, is where people pay for a post. They give you they give the influencer a couple of $1,000s. They go out and post something on behalf of the company, and then they just hope that it creates opportunities and that it creates ROI. Or they sponsor a podcast with influencers that are on the podcast, or whatever the case may be. Where I found this to be most successful is less about the pay structure and more about the relationship, right? And so rather than just like paying people to go out there and tell the world to go try your product, which may work in a B2C setting, in a B2B setting, the relationship is important. What I mean by that is where I found success in running B2B influencer programs is being able to identify some of those influencers in your space. Most likely they're pretty active on LinkedIn, or you can go out to your customer base and just ask them like, hey, who's your go-to, like who do you trust for information, and that starts to kind of curate a list of potential partners there, and even looking at your customer base in and of itself. But once you have your list of partners for an influencer program, being able to create that relationship where you're putting the product in front of them. You almost create like a advisory council, more than an influencer program, where you're keeping them up to date on the things that are being released from a product standpoint, and in that way arming them with all this great content where they can go out and say, hey, I got a sneak peek of this thing from XYZ company. It's amazing. Here's what it does. Here's how you can get your hands on it. And now it's less about like, hey, I really like these guys over at XYZ company, go try them out, and more about, hey, like I've seen this, I've given feedback on this, I'm part of this advisory council, go try it out. And really incentivizing based off of the closed won opportunities. What are the deals like comping off of deals that actually close? Whatever percentage makes sense. I generally look at what's the general cost of a marketing sourced, closed one opportunity, and that's the amount that I generally allocate to those kinds of programs. But it may vary company to company.
Yeah. On a theoretical level, it's really interesting thinking about like the role of the influencer and the relationship between the potential buyer and the brand, because really the influencer kind of personifies both to the other. So if we think about, I, if I'm a brand and I have a strong perspective, I probably want to find an influencer with a similar perspective so that we're pretty well aligned on that. And there's a high likelihood that their followers will have a similar perspective. So I think there's quite a bit of alignment between all of those. But going the other direction, like the influencer is going to want to protect their own personal brand and protecting their audience from businesses basically taking advantage of the relationship. How have you? I mean, I don't have quite as much experience in this. Like, what are some good examples of like SaaS or other B2B influencers that you've seen?
Yeah, that's a great question. Without giving out any names, where I've seen this work in companies that I've worked with, or we've partnered with a podcaster who is generally, like you said, generally aligned with what our take on that particular subject is, and in that way, there is kind of this like back and forth. We have a great reputation, which certainly helps in gaining the trust of the influencer. But understanding the means that podcaster has to be able to distribute the message was really important. And so that's where I've seen it really work is somebody who is in tune with your space, not just somebody who generally has a strong following, but somebody who has maybe a smaller following, but it's more specialized into the type of product or solution that you actually offer. That's kind of the approach that we've taken is, who has a smaller audience but more impactful, but also is aligned with how we feel about the topic at hand.
All right. So thinking again through this as a potential opportunity for a marketing team, how should they go about um, evaluating the influencer market and perhaps the overall course of setting up not only the deal but the campaign?
Yeah. So the approach first is you got to like I said, you got to curate kind of a list of potentials. Working with your customer success department or whomever is in charge of that relationship to identify from your customer base like who they go to and who they trust. That'll give you a really good starting point. But then looking at generally we break influencers into three categories. You have the big like macro influencers that have hundreds of thousands of connections on LinkedIn or wherever, followers that speak about topics generally, and also have a wide varying base of followers that aren't necessarily passionate about one specific topic. Sweet spot we try to focus on are kind of the medium tier of influencer that might have anywhere from 2,500 followers to 10,000 followers, but they speak passionately about the particular topic that we're in the business to solve, and so that alignment's created, and they're relatively knowledgeable about what we do, and that makes their endorsement a little bit easier. And then there's like the smaller like micro influencer, kind of that under 2,500 is how we generally classify those. That you don't want to like necessarily cast off. That's kind of our second tier that we like to focus on, because they may be up and coming. They may have even a tighter knit group that really leans on them for advice. But once you kind of have that set up, that list curated, Being able to reach out, whether it's through LinkedIn or email or through a mutual contact, particularly if your customers are connected in that way, to make an introduction, and having a conversation about the vision behind why you're looking at that partnership. Looking at like, hey, we're closely aligned, explaining how your values line up, and how you value them in terms of another voice that can talk about the message that you've got to share. From there, being able to work out the details of, hey, this is what we generally offer per closed one deal. Here is, from your base, here is the typical deal size that you would be able to expect, and so every deal is going to turn out about this amount of money. So they kind of see like the carrot, what's in it for them, and then going through and just explaining, like making sure you have a solid program set up where they're more bought in than just like getting on a LinkedIn video and saying, "Hey guys, go buy this product." Like we mentioned, like having them really bought into your product development process, giving feedback about things that you're thinking about, or leaning on them to tell you like what market trends are emerging, and then being able to follow up with the output and say like, here's kind of the feedback you gave, here's kind of the output, here's the product or feature enhancement we're releasing, and giving them kind of that first look to be able to speak about that. So having that solid program set up, being able to explain what that program looks like, painting the vision of like what that relationship's going to be like for them, and then being able to instill in them the trust in your product, having some case studies, some testimonials, examples of how your product really is impacting your customer base and helping them solve their problems should excite the influencer as well to say, hey, this is a great product. My base is likely struggling with the same kind of issue, and so it creates that buy-in from that front as well.
So we've mostly been talking about social influencers. I don't know if this exists. Is there such thing as a dark social influencer?
Yeah, absolutely. I think with the emergence of, and these are tougher to find, but certainly with the emergence of like Slack communities and even email groups and things like that, peer groups, it certainly exists. I for one have not had a lot of success in breaking through into those types of influencers, but I'm sure that's going to become even more and more important to solve.
Yeah. Cool. I think we could mark that one as answered. We need like a big stamp. Answered.
Nice. Okay, Tom. This one from Ask Reddit is a pretty beefy topic. I think there's a lot to be said here. So I'm going to read the whole thing here, and then we'll have a chance to dive into some of this. But the title of the Reddit thread is "The Truth About B2B Marketing." All right, so get ready for this. I've been meaning to post this for a while. There are loads of posts on this forum about marketing. A substantial number of these are based on consumer marketing and some B2B. There's an impression out there that if you do Twitter, you do content marketing and do email marketing, that somehow your customers will magically come to you. However, in my experience, this does not happen in the B2B space. Even though companies who do brilliant content marketing, they will hit the radar of their target market, but many of these B2B prospects will still not contact you. The reality is the only way to reach these prospects is actually picking up the phone, calling them, and having a live conversation with them. This is what gets the needle moving in B2B markets. The real role of marketers, this kills me right here. The real role of marketers in the B2B space is just to create awareness and pave the way for a conversation. And yes, inbound is nice, but marketing efforts of B2B marketers must be compelling enough so the prospects will actually take a call from one of your representatives. This is the essence of good B2B marketing, and B2B marketers and their managers need to realize the real magic happens when a good marketing operation is aligned with a good sales operation. Won't disagree with that. But using marketing alone without an outbound sales motion is like riding a bicycle with a flat tire up a steep hill. I can't wait to get to this one. It will have you some of the way, but the effort required to get to the top will be monumental. Having your marketing efforts backed with a good salesperson is like getting air into the flat tire. All of a sudden, the bike gets you further and quicker with much less effort. I don't know, Tom. Sounds like a salesperson wrote this one. What do you
That's
think?
exactly what I was thinking. Like Steve, VP of Sales, wrote this.
Yeah,
If
it's
only
got to be.
marketing would make it easier for me to call people.
Got to be. Let's dive into this, Tom. I'm curious your thoughts. Curious your thoughts about the relationship between inbound, outbound, and sales marketing alignment.
I mean, marketing is hard. Sales is hard. Everybody wants their job to be easier, and everybody thinks that the other team should do a better job. Like, how many? Take the flip side. Marketers hand so many leads over to the sales department, but they just can't close them. Like, I'm doing my job. So I think I can understand how they think that the salesperson's the hero in this relationship, and if people aren't ready to talk when I call them, then marketing hasn't done their job.
Yeah, I get like, hey, marketing helps get them warmed up for that sales call, but I think where the miss here is they're expecting this sales call to happen before there's any real high intent action taken. They think that just because like awareness is created, they're aware of who your company is and generally what you do, that all of a sudden they're just going to be sitting around waiting for that magical sales call to come and save them from whatever pain they're experiencing right now. And the problem I have with that is like, if they were that bought in, they would take that high intent action. They wouldn't be waiting for you, to make that phone call. The other problem I have with that is like, man, the only way to scale an organization like that, like whoever this guy works with, the only way to scale an organization like that is by adding headcount. You can only create more pipeline and more opportunities and more sales by adding more salespeople. And over time, that creates a very difficult operation to scale efficiently and sustainably. So that's I appreciate I appreciate the comment about marketing and sales alignment, but I think understanding where that trade-off needs to exist and having some metrics around how you're going to profitably grow are important factors that kind of were amiss on this post.
I think what's missing here is like there seems to be a gap between what marketing hands off and what sales picks up. Like, where are they getting these people to call from? Is it just cold lists? Because then that's completely outside of what marketing's doing. Or if they're warmer because marketing has reached them, like how would you approach that? Like finding that middle spot of getting good quality leads for even outbound.
Yeah, to be honest, like I'm a, I'll qualify with this. Different industries have different requirements in terms of like how you go to market, how you take that message out. And so, in some markets, it maybe the only way to get out to market is by salespeople picking up the phone. However, generally from the hundreds of companies that I've consulted or worked with, I've seen this commonality of like you really don't need salespeople just like dialing for dollars. Really, that's really how I got into marketing. Was I was a salesperson, early salesperson at a freshly minted Series A company. The private equity firm comes in and says, "We want you to give this list a call." And so I'm pounding the phone day in and day out, making 100 phone calls to get one meeting, 100 meetings to get one sale. I'm like, man, 1,000, 10,000 phone calls to get a sale, like terrible numbers. Like this is a complete waste. There's got to be a better way. And in that time, like the demand generation formula that I've created that's led us here to Edge Marketing, that's helping so many different companies efficiently grow, is a process that for just a most recent company has increased their sales in a 2 year span 255% over that 2 year span, while actually decreasing their sales team by 20% and producing a CAC payback period. So the amount that it took to pay for that marketing lead to come in, it's paying you back in less than 9 months. And that's the type of efficiency that's needed to grow quickly, but also sustainably so that you're not running out of money and causing problems on your operations teams.
I know this guy had, or I presume a guy. I know this redditor had talked a little bit about strong marketing and sales alignment. Talk. I know you've been on both sides of that. Talk a little bit more about how those should be working together.
Yeah, I've had some great sales leaders that I've worked with and collaborated with, and the relationship starts with a true like SLA of like, hey, this is the ideal customer profile and qualification criteria that an opportunity needs to meet before I pass it over to the sales team. And so if those qualification criteria are unknown, we're working on this on the marketing front to develop those contacts through data enrichment or whatever means might need to happen to get that information. If they don't meet that criteria, we don't pass them on to the sales team. And so in that way, they're getting the highest quality deals that are converting from stage one to closed one at 25, 22 to 25%. And in that way, they're not wasting their time on deals that are never going to close. They're focused on the most, salespeople are one of the most expensive resources in the company. So you're putting your most expensive resource on your highest value opportunities. And so having that SLA of like, here's what we're going to pass over to you. Um, here's the rate that we expect these to close. Having that good SLA and that relationship is important. But from there, really creating a tight feedback loop where you're evaluating those deals with the sales leader that you pass over from marketing to say like, here's the profile of the ones that just aren't good opportunities, so that you're always refining what your good opportunities are and where you're out to market to get. And so in that way, you're listening, you're iterating, and it's a collaborative effort, not a siloed effort of marketing's over here creating this and then sales go do what you've got to do. That's where I've seen the best relationships formed.
You talked a little bit about demand gen. What Where does that fit within the customer journey? If we're talking about from like awareness through uh, sales conversation.
Yeah, demand generation is really like before you even know that the individual is looking for you. So it's how you're putting information out into the market to educate the buyer or to educate the market. It's how you're leveraging content and other platforms to position yourself and establish trust in your company, and then ultimately being ready to help the buyer when they're ready to take action. But it even extends beyond that. It extends into like, how are we thinking about how we speed up sales cycles? How are we thinking about creating pieces of content that assist the buyer even when they're in the sales journey? And for that matter, even understanding from our customer success or our delivery teams, like what are the customers they like to work with, and how do we find more of those?
Yeah, I think they are often forgotten. The customer success teams, sales closes them, and customer success hopes for the best.
Yeah, everybody has people they like to work with. Marketing, we're like, all right, here, if we had our way, here's everybody that is interested. But salespeople have those deals that they know are unqualified, or they don't have good product fit, or they're just more difficult to work with. And so that funnel from marketing to sales gets a little bit skinnier. And then when you get to CS, it's like, man, who are the people who are just like draining our support resources? They're always on the phone with support. They can never figure anything out, but they didn't do everything they're supposed to do at implementation. And so, understanding that is just as important as anything of like who's going to be a good customer and have a good relationship with our company as we deliver on our product promise.
All right, so inbound versus outbound. Does outbound have a role?
For me, I've in my approach, I've tried to scale out outbound over time. I've centered more on providing the value that helps guide people through the buying process. You know, um, One thing to note is like, generally like 5% of the market is thrown around as being in a buying process. what people forget is of that other 95%, 80, 85% are actively engaged in research. And so, making a phone call isn't necessarily, interrupting someone's day isn't necessarily going to be the way that you get them. But being present at the right time, understanding high intent signals, getting information in there to help guide them through the process is where I prefer to play. Because just as I've been on the sales front and making those phone calls, I've also been on the receiving end, and nothing is more damaging to your brand than if you call me when I've just sat down to dinner for the night.
Yeah. I think it kind of comes down to, again, just matching the value for the value. So the highest value employees working with the highest potential value clients.
Yeah, no doubt.
Cool. So answered. Unless you have anything else to add on that one.
Yeah, there's a couple of things there. I think when I'm gonna unstamp your answered question here. I think I assumed that this was a sales leader just because of the way that it was talked about, like salespeople are it. But what's more concerning is if this is a marketing leader, because there are certain industries or certain functions within a business that start to get looked at as like a cost center, not a revenue producer, but a cost center. And so when marketing is looked at as just creating awareness that's untrackable, and then we just like kind of warm up the ocean for the salespeople to go fish in, it's a dangerous spot for a marketing team to be in too, when there's no direct line to revenue. You're not heavily engaged in creating pipeline that turns into revenue and helps the company achieve their business outcomes, business objectives. And so when times are tough, that's why a lot of times you see marketing departments being the first ones to be slashed, is because like, well, we can outsource this, or like, do we really, we'll just make more phone calls on the sales team, or whatever, the case may be. And so if this is a marketer that, doesn't understand the through line to revenue, it's a dangerous place to be.
Yeah. And I guess this whole idea is also pretty industry specific. We're probably coming at this from like a SaaS lens, but maybe in more like real world or real product scenarios where relationships need to be built, I could see maybe it having a bit more of a function.
Yeah, there's, generally in B2B SaaS, I'm also an advocate to not attend in-person events, because you can use that budget elsewhere. But even within that, there's certain industries within B2B SaaS where that makes sense. For instance, if you're in manufacturing or trucking transportation, a lot of those relationships are built in person, and certainly that could translate into certain industries out, B2B, that aren't necessarily software. But it's that's why it's important to understand your customer profile and how they like to be approached.
Yeah. All right. Can we stamp it answered now?
All
We
right,
have,
go for it.
all right. Answered.